Hey y'all, what is going on? What is going on? It's your girl, Melba Pearson, Melba from Miami, Melba for Justice, also known as the Rice Legal Diva, and it is time for another Mondays with Melba. Excuse the slight glare, I'm making it do what it do. I am at the National Black Prosecutors Association conference in Chicago. It is our 40-year anniversary, and so it is like homecoming, the cookout, and legal education all wrapped into one. So it is absolutely amazing and excited to spend time with amazing prosecutors, some of whom I came up with, some of whom I've met over time, and just see the amazing work that's going on out there. So it's been an amazing week. Stay tuned for all the pictures because I'm going to stay active on social media with all the good goings ons. But and one other note before I turn to our amazing guest today, Allison Matulli, who is a friend and author and just all things amazing. Wanted to do a quick comment on the situation that's happening with State's Attorney Monique Worrell out of the Ninth Judicial Circuit in Florida, which is the Orlando Osceola area. The governor has removed her from office, claiming she was derelict in her duty because he felt that she was exercising too much discretion in waiving minimum mandatory sentences and trying to give juveniles a second chance. Let me just be clear. Okay, I will do a longer statement on another point in time. I did do an explainer on TikTok that is available on my Facebook, Instagram, as well as on TikTok. But just know that this is dangerous for the following reason. Voters are the ones who hire and fire elected officials. It's up to the voters. Now, does the governor have the power to remove an elected official from office if they're doing something wrong? Absolutely. But usually that power is used if, let's say, you have an elected official that's struggling with addiction or has a horrible health issue and literally has not come to work for like 6 months. Okay. That is a situation where you remove them from office. But if you disagree with how they are handling things, that is up to the voters because, again, Monique Worrell was elected with 66% of the vote in Orlando and Osceola. 66%. Which means she campaigned, told the people what she was going to do, and the people co-signed and said, yes, this is the leadership we want. When we have leaders that come in and start taking over the will of the voters, that disenfranchises people because then you're sitting here like, but I went and voted, and the person I want to represent me is not the person that's in that office, number one. And number two, you get to the mindset of, well, then why am I going to vote anyway? Because my vote doesn't count. So that's why it's so dangerous on a lot of levels in terms of democracy. And if you're like, well, that's just some, liberal prosecutor, whatever. Okay, cool. Hope you feel the same way if a governor that is a Democrat comes in and starts removing Republican prosecutors, right? Because they disagree with their mindset. It's problematic for everyone. It should be, again, up to the voters. All right, off my soapbox, turning to Allison. Allison, thank you so much for joining us on Mondays with Melba. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Melba. Very excited to be here.
So, little background. Allison and I met while I was president of the Gwyneth Cherry Black Women Lawyers Association. I met her beloved husband, Gianluca, shout out to Gianluca, who we were at an event, and he was literally walking around and saw our table, was like, Black women lawyers? My wife is a Black woman lawyer. I'm like, hey, let's talk, bring her over. And we met and we have been friends ever since. And that was a solid, 6, 7 years ago? So time flies.
It really does. It really does. Good times for sure.
Right? So, Allison, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you have come to this work of educating young people about their rights and about the law.
Well, I think my role in this particular expertise started out myself when I went to Howard Law. I had the privilege, of course, of falling into that legacy, which is an amazing legacy to be a part of, where really trained to be a social engineer and think about how you yourself can contribute. Later, I went into education, which is the field that I love and live every day. And in that role as an educator, I was really surprised to see that there wasn't anything about the law. There wasn't much. Our civic education has kind of fallen apart. It's to the side, and everything else goes, and that content is kind of left alone. And I think it's just there's an intimidation about the law, right? People either don't understand it, they're fearful of it, a combination of both. And when they actually need it, they see it as two things, either unattainable because of the cost of law, or it's feared because it might be a moment when you actually, people think when they need lawyers or those kinds of people around them to protect them in some way, shape, or form, there's a moment that they need that lawyer because of a fearful situation. That's the reality. So it's one of those fields that I particularly think we should start planting those seeds very early. And it's very, where our children are sponges, okay? So they're able to absorb all kinds of content. I have two of my own that I've planted many seeds in and have grown up in many different gardens, and they're more than willing to tell you a thing or two. And I think harnessing that First Amendment and giving those kids the tools in which to use them makes them more conscious citizens. It makes them not only conscious citizens where they're invested, and you're just talking about voting rights. I mean, my kids have been going voting with me since they could crawl. So when you make something a natural part of someone's existence, it's not something that they think of whether or not they will opt in.
Right. Right.
And that includes law. So I have come up with ways, and when I couldn't find anything, I created my own tools.
That's what I'm talking about.
So, you got to roll up your sleeves sometimes, and, you end up in these roles where fortunately, maybe you have the skills to put things together and help children see things in a way, in a disciplined way, how they can use those kinds of tools in their daily life, in their daily world, because it has to be relevant. Content has to be relevant to your day-to-day life. It's great to teach kids a ton of different things, but just think, the one thing that dictates our entire community, right? How we interact with each other. What happens when we send a text message and it's, quote unquote, a body part. So these are all relevant things to children. These are very relevant things to kids that we have to have them understand. You're not just raising a morally good person. You're raising a person that's conscious of their rights. And it's two different things. We used to think it's just fine to raise someone that's just, morally good. That'll make them law abiding. Well, guess what? That's not always the case. So I think that neglecting that major part of life that sets up our entire community, how we interact with each other, we are leaving kids in a very difficult situation. And the quicker we understand that just giving them these tools and just feeding it to them on a daily basis, so it's just part of their natural fabric, is really important.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to drop this link in the comments or in the body of the this video. But you wrote a very powerful op-ed for the Miami Herald, and it talked a lot about Santo Max, your son, speaking up for himself and sort of, the lessons he learned from you and how he was able to use that to, advocate for his rights. Can you share, obviously, again, everybody's going to be able to read it. Hopefully it's not behind a paywall, but it is. I'll find a way to work around it. Sorry, Miami Herald. But if you can talk a little bit about what the genesis of that, and sort of like the top line messages that folks should come away with from that.
Oh, absolutely. So the op-ed I wrote that just came out in the Miami Herald circumvents around an issue that my son faced. So he himself was going to a school downtown. After going back from COVID, he was homeschooled for the whole time, or virtually schooled, or whatever you'd like to call it. And after going back in, he found himself, and these are friends he's had for years. So for him, it's a lifetime, right? An 8-year-old, if you've known someone more than double your lifetime, yes, it's a whole lifetime. So he went back in, had a ton of friends before, went back in, and he felt completely ostracized. He was not interacting with the students. They were not interacting with him. He was trying to figure out how to navigate those waters. He was, considered in the gifted program in Miami. It's a small class setting. It's not a lot of kids, like 18 kids, great ratio. But in that classroom setting, there was no one that would connect with him. And he would come home and say, I'm just trying to make one friend. I'm trying to make one friend. He was eating lunch alone by himself. He was projects, he was by himself. PE, he was by himself. And this is a kid that is in athletics. You and I both know he plays a ton of tournaments in tennis. He plays team tennis, tons of friends on the tennis court. He is in Miami Music Project. He's played the cello for years. So he, as I said, he has been planted in many gardens, and he is always seeking friendships. He's always looking to have conversations, and he's just silly. So he likes to play, and he's humorous, and he makes tons of like jokes. So when the teacher told me that this kid wanted to be by himself, I was perplexed by that as a parent. And kids are usually taught like that is the end all be all. What the teacher says, that is a voice of authority,
Mm-hmm.
right? It happens in law too. There are
Yep.
voices of authority, as we know. So
Mm-hmm.
you can look at it that way. But in a classroom, the teacher is that authority. And we had multiple adult meetings where he came in and he said, "This is how my heart is hurting." you know and no matter what they said, him wanting to be alone, telling him how to make friends, and this is a kid again, completely social in every other setting. How to make friends, how to teach the others who are ostracizing you how to be your friend. So, and again, that is a form of bullying. When you leave others out, that is a form of bullying. So I said, I talked to my son and I talked to the adults in the room, and regardless of my voice, my son said to me, "No one can tell my story better than I can, Mama."
Oh my God. Done. Done. Oh my God. Mm.
So I realized I myself, and I learned so much from my own children as I did when I was in the classroom teaching students. You have to understand those seeds that you have planted when they actually come to fruition, right? And the moment my son said that, I realized something, that this kid had the tools, regardless of what the authority figures were saying in their observations. He knew himself, and he knew he had done everything as a child could possibly do to, to be part of that classroom community, and it just did not work. So I think it's really important, and this goes to free speech.
Mhm.
You have to teach your children that they have to trust their voice. There is so much power in their voice. And sometimes it may not match up with the adult in the room, but it doesn't invalidate what they have to say about themselves. And no one, as Santamak said, no one can tell his story better than he can. And our children need to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I again hearing, I just remember reading it and just being so struck by him just saying like, no, I want to tell my own story. I own my story, and that agency at such a young age, when we have grown folks out here that are afraid to, we're all afraid to tell our story because we're like, is it gonna offend anybody? Should we this? Should we that? And the baby had it right. He's like, no, I'm gonna tell my story and I'm gonna fight for myself. And that's so encouraging. So
Yeah,
encouraging, you
yeah.
know?
And
Because
absolutely, Melba. The thing is, we I know there's a paradox there, right? We want them to speak up, but then when they do, we're sometimes afraid what they're going to say. We're offended by what they say. But honestly speaking, if you focus on both, creating someone that is morally good and who really, and you pull on those strings as a parent, as an educator, because it's not about Santamak just learning his rights, but he's respecting the rights of others too. He
Yes.
didn't go into class and he didn't start pushing and pulling people and trying to figure out a way to get their attention. No, he used his all the skills he had as a citizen that wanted to be a positive member of the community. So it's really important for us to understand that there is sometimes, and you don't know what you're going to get when you empower kids because they're young and you're constantly molding and shifting and figuring out how. Because I also have him say, "Oh, I'm not going to eat this for dinner." What about
Right.
I'm going to share that because it's my first freedom. So
It is my First Amendment right to decline vegetables.
so mind you, it's not always 100% pretty, but I think the good outweighs anything else. The good outweighs anything else.
Absolutely. So, you've taken this journey, this mission of educating our young people. You did it in the classroom, and then you created the Little Lawyers program. So, can you talk a little bit about that? And then we're going to get into your two amazing books.
Oh yeah. So the Little Lawyers, I actually started that a few years ago. And the whole goal of the Little Lawyers is to create real curriculum that you can use. What I do now is I provide training and workshops regarding Little Lawyers curriculum in order for teachers to have tools in the classroom to make law very colorful, very engaging, from a child standpoint. Because when you hear the word law, even teachers, they're like, law for little kids? Yes, it is possible. It's just like anything else. You have to give them the right dose. You
Yeah.
have to make sure it's child appropriate. You have to make sure it looks in a certain way that entertains a child's mind, right? So
Right.
I think it's really important to kind of focus on that, and that's what the Little Lawyers does.
So as almost like an offshoot of that, or at least, it was the incubator for what came next. Tell us a little bit about your first book and sort of how that came together and a little bit about the premise of that book.
So my first book is regarding a Supreme Court case. And if you as we are lawyers, if you happen to go to law school, it's one of those cases that you are going to be taught and you are going to understand exactly what's going on. What I did was I realized that these cases, because I taught history, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I realized just these cases have beautiful, interesting historical value to them, you know? And it's the Plessy v. Ferguson case, right? So the first book is uh, Plessy the Shoemaker Makes His Mark. And what that really comes down to is telling the story behind a Supreme Court case. I tell kids it's not Jay-Z and Beyonce that are going to show up in the Supreme Court and bring their case there. It's you and I who probably have been stepped on too much, pushed too far, just exhausted by what we see around us. And we're going to get to the point where we're like, okay, this is the moment. We've got this. We've got to do something. And those moments are so critical in life. And it's so critical and so beautiful within the fabric of the American story. So the Plessy v. Ferguson case, it is the separate but equal case, as many of you may already know. And what I did with that particular book, and it was the very beginning of me really thinking about ways to story tell, right? I've always been a storyteller by my nature. So when I thought about turning those cases into stories, it just that case came to mind immediately. Um, as I go through the book, I've gone through many schools and actually even acted out the book,
Oh,
where the kids are watching, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And then you switch characters and you switch. So you try to for me, it's so important to bring law alive. It's so
mhm.
important to make it experiential. I'm a certified secondary Montessori teacher, so I really think of how to make everything become live in a classroom. And that's what I did with that particular story in that particular book.
And so it went so amazingly well the first time that you got yourself together and said, hang on, ready for the sequel? Here we come. So talk to us about your newest book, which is, oh, by the way, #1 on Amazon in its category. That's what I'm talking about. Your Freedom, Your Power, A Kid's Guide to the First Amendment. Tell us a bit more about that.
So that was wow. I mean, coming from the Plessy where you're talking about one story, one case, right? And then going into multiple cases. So that book, I have a co-author on that book, and we're both lawyers. So when we came together, and it was, I came up with the idea. I said, we have to have something for middle grade kids. We have to have something that they can understand, that they can really have a tool with which they can just grab and go and get information. I'm so tired of kids trying to Google information with respect to, yes, not just adults. And it's scarier sometimes when it's kids doing it.
Right.
But trying to understand their rights via Google, as we know, you get all kinds of things. And not everything is correct. Not everything applies to your state. Not everything.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. And they don't necessarily understand that. So we go through everything in that book from understanding federal versus state to really breaking down. It's a kid's guide to the First Amendment. So I've had adults at this point tell me, hey, I got this book for my kid, but guess what? I'm reading it too because I didn't understand, state v federal or something. But the thing is, it's interesting cases of how kids themselves have used their First Amendment rights, and there are tons of them littered throughout history. There are tons. There's a ton happening right now.
Yeah.
So kids are very active. They're very engaged, and they also want those particular types of tools that they can sit there and absorb information that they're able to use. I mean, it should not be abstract. It has to be something that they could implement right here, right now.
And so I just think that is fascinating how the parents are like, actually, I'm going to take this children's book because I mean, I think a lot of the cases and the aspects you touch on in your book are not necessarily things we learned in school. Or it may have been touched on very briefly in a larger context, and we miss the significance because of age or the framework we are in our lives, right? As opposed to when you go to law school, you're going to be tested on it, so you're going to touch it, right? But not everybody goes to law school. So I think it's just very interesting that a children's book has been such an interesting educational vehicle for grown people. Because who's the book intended for? Like what age range appropriate approximately?
Yeah, so because it's middle grade, it's technically 10 and up, usually until 14, that age group. But as you said, it's literally the way it's written, the language is completely approachable. And that's the part of it that's really the sweet spot. I think because law tends to be so abstract
Mm-hmm.
and it goes on, and those of us who's written or
Yeah.
and or been tested
Mm,
know in that legal framework, yes, it is very meaty, the topic, but it
right.
chew through a lot of that. We made the language was the key, and it worked a lot on the language to make sure that it was approachable. As an educator in the classroom, I've worked at several independent schools throughout the country, here in Miami, in New York, in California. And the focus has always been, for me, how to make everything so approachable that a child can pick it up and say, oh my gosh, I completely get it. That light, you see that light hovering above the head, and they're like, oh, I got this. This is second nature.
And isn't that like the most rewarding feeling? You're like, huh, okay, like message received. This is the mission. This is awesome, right?
So true. So true. Yes, absolutely.
So what's next for you? What's the next project you're working on? And, what gaps do you kind of see that is not currently being filled that not only do you hope to address, that you hope others would join you in addressing, especially now in this climate?
Yeah, so I am now working on, and by the way, Your Freedom, Your Power does touch on censorship as well. So I'll just throw
Mm-hmm.
that out there if anyone is very interested in banned books, um, which, as you know, is a hot topic.
Yes.
But I think it's really important to, as I look forward to future projects, I have two Disney books coming out. Um, if you're familiar with Ubuntu, which is, of course, the African philosophy that really focuses on community
Mm-hmm.
and what that means when you ingrain it as part of your upbringing, right? It's,
Mm-hmm.
again, focusing on things that are not external to us, but things that we internalize or breathe in such a way that it's just second nature.
Mm-hmm.
And those that are familiar with that term and that philosophy will understand. I myself cannot sit and be full and have this, wonderful meal if my neighbor is starving.
Right.
So it's as simple as that. And we really need to understand, and this is about planting those seeds in our children, is having them have a conscious eye to those around us and how they themselves are empowered to make sure that as a nation, as within a community, each person is cared for, including themselves,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I'm always thinking of things that way, how I can empower kids to take that next step in life where they're internalizing things. And these things are just second nature. I think we can raise children that are so conscious about themselves and what they bring to the table and what to expect when they get to the table.
That part. Mhm. Yeah, it's like, okay, get to the table, and you're like, okay, I'm here. What do I do now?
What's up next? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's really amazing. So, in our last few minutes, can you tell folks, number one, how to find both of your books, and number two, how can they connect with you? Especially, there are a lot of amazing folks that are in the teaching field that watch the show. Huge shout out to United Teachers of Dade and all the amazing, amazing educators, not only in the state of Florida, where I know it ain't easy for y'all. I'm in the same boat, but across the country. So really got to shout out and thank them for the hard work that they do. And of course, you, Allison, for, again, bringing those tools and identifying a gap and doing something about it. But can you tell everyone how to find your books and how to engage with you, especially if they want to bring you into their classroom, their book group, whatever the case may be?
Perfect. I mean, I first of all, I do as well want to thank educators beforehand for all that they do,
Mm-hmm.
because without your work, we do not have this discussion. This is a pointless discussion. So, in order to reach me, I'm at thelittleLawyers.com. So that's with an S at the end, thelittleLawyers.com. And you can always email me directly and I will respond immediately. Allison.Matulli@thelittleLawyers.com. And I look forward to engaging. I look forward to also your feedback about this book. Are you able to use it as a tool and actively engage students? And if you have a question, if something comes up in class, reach out to me and let me know, how I can help, really help you transition that particular piece of work into your class.
Awesome. And y'all get yourself on Amazon and order Your Freedom, Your Power, A Kid's Guide to the First Amendment by Allison Matulli. You can put it on your Kindle. You can get the hard copy. I just got one for my friend's son. I'm going to be getting more for the young and the young at heart in my life, because again, it's about the refresher or learning what you may never have gotten, and also training the next generation so they are empowered to speak out for or against whatever issue sits closest to their heart. So this is great for everyone. So again, thank you so much, Allison, for joining us on Monday with Melba. Appreciate all that you're doing. Adore you, love you, respect you. You are amazing. And hey, to everyone out there, thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next week. We're going to be talking about politics. Surprise, surprise. But there is a new political action committee that has just been formed in the state of Florida. So we're going to dig into what they intend to do and how they intend to bring change throughout the state of Florida. So with that, y'all, signing off. Take good care, stay woke, stay informed, and stay engaged. Bye.